I've got John Boyle. He is the president and CEO of the Immune Deficiency Foundation. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. When I do interviews like this or conversations like this, sometimes there's big words involved and I get very nervous. So the good thing is about the guy I'm about to bring up here in just a second is he knows all the big words. He can say them correctly. And he's the one that's got to carry the meat of this conversation. So all the pressure's on you, John. How you doing, sir?
Doing great, Clint. I really appreciate you bringing me on like this.
So now you've got to say some big words before we get out of here. So you got to just kind of impress us.
I was going to say I learned how to spell some real big words at a very early age to help explain things in my world. So happy to say them and break them down to smaller words, whatever works for.
You're going to have to for me. Let's do this. Let's start out with this because I want to. We have a limited time together today. We may do this series of these conversations because there's so many different things we could break this off and trails we could chase. I would love to know what do you do at at your organization, and then after you tell me what you do at that organization, I want you to tell me what primary immune deficiency is, or you can reverse that. What is it, and what do you do? Then we'll dive into your story, and that's where all of our questions will start.
Well, we'll flip flop them and see what makes most sense here.
Yeah.
Sure. I'll maybe do it in the order that you suggested. So I'm the president and CEO of the Immune Deficiency Foundation. We're a nonprofit organization headquartered in Maryland, national organization, and we really are a patient advocacy organization for people with what are known as primary immune deficiency diseases. And what those are basically defects, of a part of the immune system. So basically everyone's got an immune system, even if they sometimes don't think that they do. And it's got a whole bunch of different pieces. You've got B cells and T cells and little things called phagocytes, and then the complement, and a whole host of other pieces that really are responsible for keeping you safe against bacteria, viruses, foreign invaders, etc. And so, everyone has got a little bit of variation within their immune system because of the sort of things they've been exposed to, and most people's work really well. But some people have, because of kind of an innate or intrinsic or genetic issue, that means that there's something about a part of their immune system that's either missing or it's not functioning properly. Now, that's what's called a primary immune deficiency. So, it's not something you get. It's not something that can be caught or passed along, except to your children. And so these genetic immune deficiency disorders where, you aren't making antibodies, or you make antibodies, but the phagocytes in your system don't break down the viruses or the bacteria that the rest of your immune system captures. It causes problems, and frankly, in most people, it leads to a lot of infection and a lot of other challenges. So, at its heart, those are what primary immune deficiencies are, and IDF, the organization I work for, really helps the people who are diagnosed with them and looking for something a little bit beyond what maybe they learned from their doctors or care team.
When I started looking at your website, and we have a mutual friend that actually connected us, Cheryl, who I appreciate her connecting us, because I have so many friends that struggle with different things, and we hear this immune compromised, right? We hear that, especially during the year of COVID. Mm-hmm. When I jumped on your website and started looking around, and you mentioned it, I was amazed at the number of illnesses that fall under this umbrella, and how in this process there are so many opportunities for something to go wrong inside your immune system, because you can have one that works too much. You can have one that attacks this part, one that everything works great, except if this happens. There's all these variations of your immune system that can go wrong. And the reason I titled this event what I did, and you and I were on the phone a couple of weeks ago, is a lot of the friends that we have and a lot of the people in the world that we're standing next to don't look sick. They don't look sick, but they are.
That's the world of the, as we say, the invisible illness. And if you have an immune deficiency where your immune system is lacking, what you might see is on certain days, as I have one, I might look a little haggard. Might look a little pale because I'm fighting something off, but no one can see it. There's no outward, piece that shows that. But then again, and this is not an immune deficiency, but since we're talking the immune system, there are a lot of people who have what is essentially an overactive immune system. And so they have an autoimmune disorder where maybe a part of their immune system is attacking a part of the body. You wouldn't know it in most cases to look at them. And frankly, in a good number of cases, you have people who have both. They have their immune system where part of the function is down and then part of their function is up. And they essentially have what's in a dysregulated immune system. So it's frustrating, it's confusing, and all of those things. But again, no one would ever know, and much like so many other people who are having, who are living with cancer, with heart disease, with any of those things, you generally don't know what people are going through. But it's chronic, it's lifelong. And I think that the more, and appreciate you're going to bring me on here to talk about some of these issues, the more that people think about it, the more I hope empathy that they have and the more thoughtfulness that they have for, the fact that people can have a lot going on under the surface, but also, one of the things that, is a challenge is that, there are a lot of these disorders where it manifests, maybe shortly after birth, as it did with me. But then there are people who, in our community, they're diagnosed in their 80s, frankly, some of which who've been kind of limping along for decades, and then some of which who it's only somewhat recent that time bomb kind of went off and they started dealing with it. So hopefully it kind of just opens people up to the fact that there's a lot out there, and be it immune related issues or others, there's some interesting things to be learned, and people dealing with some real challenges, but bravely and doing it well.
Yeah, and the reason I brought that up is I've had conversations with folks. If you're a friend or a family member and you know somebody like this, it's easy to dismiss it of, hey, just almost pull yourself up by the bootstraps type thing. Just, look, you don't have a cold, you feel fine, you look great, you're working out all the time, you're eating healthy, it's okay, you're fine. And that's like telling somebody who's on high blood pressure medication, as long as your diet's in order. I'm a big believer on do what you can organically and holistically before you rely on medicine, but stop taking or stop doing whatever you're doing to stay healthy. So I wanted to bring that up on purpose because there is a degree of patience that I think friends and families have to have, because it's something that it's one of those things that you hope that person stays healthy, because if they get sick, it can be pretty bad. That segues into what you were saying. People get it at different times. I've got friends that have got it in their late 30s or 40s, and then people like you. So tell us a little bit about your story when you were diagnosed and what you have, sir.
Sure. Well, in a lot of ways, I'm one of the lucky ones in that it was discovered really early. So, I was born, bouncing baby boy, everything seemed to be good. And when I got to about 6 months, which is about the time that the sort of antibodies that you get from your mother start to weigh off, the transplacental antibodies or ones that you might be getting from nursing, they're wearing off, and your immune system is supposed to basically kick in and do its thing on its own. I got a really horrible what started as just what seemed like a cold respiratory infection, and then basically progressed very quickly to an advanced form of pneumonia, and that threw the pediatrician and everyone else for a loop, because kids my age at 6 months aren't supposed to get sick like that. Happily, we were in Maryland and near Johns Hopkins Hospital, which was a great place to be seen, and they figured out pretty quickly, okay, the reason that this child is so sick is there's something in his immune system that is lacking. He has this immune deficiency of some sort, and it took them a little bit of time to figure out exactly which one, but they diagnosed me with a condition, and this is a mouthful, and I want to spell these things and say them early on, X-linked Agammaglobulinemia, XLA, and that essentially means I don't make any mature B cells, one of the real key components of the immune system, which means that I don't produce any antibodies naturally. And of course, in this year of COVID, people have been hearing a fair bit about antibodies. So I don't make them naturally. And once you identify the problem, sometimes there's a therapy for it. And sure enough, for mine, there was. And they put me on. And again, this is back in the late 70s, not as good a therapy as we have now, these intramuscular injections of basically donated antibodies from other people coming from human plasma. And that's called immunoglobulin. So immunoglobulin just means antibodies. So I was getting back then these little, every other week infusions of other people's antibodies to replace what it is that my body did not make up. Now, again, because I was caught early, it was scary as all get out for my parents, of course. But because I was caught early, I didn't have, the years or the decades of chronic infections of people not knowing where are these coming from that, can do a lot of damage, frankly, to your lungs and to others. So, there's a lot of us who are found pretty early who have stories similar to mine, but, frankly, more who are discovered later in life as teenagers, as young adults, or all the way on up the age ladder there.
Yeah, and it seems to me, because I have had several conversations with our friend, our mutual friend, they can get misdiagnosed the older you get too. That goes undiagnosed, should I say? They just say, "Oh, you got bad sinus infections," or "Man, she gets those lung, she gets pneumonia easy or bronchitis," and they, chronically or over time they just get worse. And again, if it goes undiagnosed, it's causing damage each time it does that. And that's why I think organizations like yours, and that's why I wanted to bring you on during the year of COVID, just to put in the back of people's minds, if that's something that, you're 60 years old and you've had 10 years of just battling this, there's a chance it's at least worth asking, right?
100%. I mean, the problem with our healthcare system, and there are certainly.
Wait a minute. Are you about to fix our healthcare system? This is going to be the best podcast of all time.
Oh, good, great. If I had any of those, what I can do is I can point to a few of the common challenges that we all have. It is not aimed at people with rare diseases, and that's in a lot of ways okay, because most people don't have those. I've got this little pin on here. Sorry, pointing the wrong direction. It's a zebra stripe. And so there's this saying in medical school, you're seeing a patient, you're trying to diagnose them. You don't know what it is that they're dealing with exactly. Well, the advice that they give to new physicians is when you hear hoofbeats, coming, up behind you, think horses, not zebras, because the odds are good that whatever that thing that you're hearing back there, when it comes by you, it's going to be a horse. You're going to say, oh, that was just a horse, because it's almost always a horse. That's the way that medicine is practiced. You basically do what you do based on the assumption that it is the likeliest scenario. But there are a lot of zebras out there. There are people like our mutual friend, like me, there's about 250,000 of us in the US alone who have some sort of primary immunodeficiency. And if you look at what I look at as a kind of a bell curve, where there's a few people who are on one side and they're really, really severe. There's a big group who are in the middle who, it's tough going, but it's, not necessarily something that's going to be obvious. And then those who are kind of at the other end where they would barely even notice it. My condition was really, really severe, especially when, I was found out young. There's other people like, our mutual acquaintance and most people out there who are somewhere in the middle where they get infections, they have maybe other conditions, could be a little bit of immune dysregulation. And our healthcare system looks at them and they say, okay, well, you're having sinus issues, as you said. Well, it's probably just chronic sinusitis. And they're not digging deeper. They're not saying, well, maybe that person's a zebra. Maybe they've got something underlying in their genetics, especially, or other factors that mean that we've got to look at them differently and we've got to treat them differently. And so people really get bounced around because they've got doctors who are treating the symptoms, because more often than not, that's going to work. But for those of us who do have an underlying condition, such as a primary immunodeficiency, well, it's just going to be a revolving door of you're going into the doctor, and they're not looking necessarily closely enough to see, well, what's really behind all this.
Well, it works till it doesn't work, right? I mean, treating the symptoms works until whatever you gets a hold of you and starts slapping you around a little bit is more than just the sinus infection. At that point, everybody kind of takes notice then at that. So as I wrote some stuff down here, and I take notes like a doctor writing himself a prescription. So I'm going to try to keep it as linear as possible. But we talked before we came on about how important it is to, to have a team of people around you. In other words, interconnect. You used interconnected, and I said there's overlap. So if you've got a primary immune deficiency, does this lend that you're going to have, depending again on what you have? So I'm not talking big general sweeping terms, but you could be more prone to having cancers. You could be more prone to having some lung issues. You'd be more prone to having arthritis. And that's where we were talking. You may have an immunologist, but there's other specialties, and they've got to work together. And they have to know their role, and that's where it gets really complicated, right?
Oh, incredibly. And back to the kind of the challenges of the healthcare system, most people are dealing with kind of one point of contact, a primary care doc. And maybe you go and you see your gastroenterologist, once every few years because there's a little something going on, or for a checkup here or there. But if you are dealing with one of these conditions, it's chronic. When you're diagnosed with one of these things, it's in your genes, it's forever. So there's no kind of coming and going. And so what you end up, having is you got to have people who are filling, as you said, kind of these different roles. You got to have your primary care doc who's kind of looking at you generally holistically. Mm-hmm. Maybe you've got an immunologist for your primary immune deficiency, who is, dealing with, the issues very specific to that condition. But maybe you've got some autoimmune issues as well. I mean, the interrelationship, between autoimmune and immune deficiency, can be pretty significant. And so,
and if you may have answered this, and I'm going to go ahead and ask because I'm the dumb guy again. Autoimmune deficiency, autoimmune versus immune deficiency. What is the fine line there? If you can just real quick.
Surely. Now, immune deficiency is when your immune system is lacking. Right. When you've got pieces missing. Right. And autoimmune is when you've got your immune systems that are overactive and maybe attacking the wrong pieces. And so, you might have, for some autoimmune conditions, a rheumatologist. You may have had enough sinus issues, and maybe chronic sinus issues, that you are dealing with what's called an ENT, ear, nose, and throat, as some people would call it, because, your immunologist or your general practitioner might not be as much of an expert there, or in terms of really getting in there. And, the incidence with folks with PI, maybe having at some point down the line a form of cancer, it's not large. But statistically, it is a little bit bigger than the general population. And so there's all these things because it's in the genes. It's just built into you that that there's all sorts of other things, some of which medical science understands reasonably well, some which they're only they kind of have an inkling about, but we've never actually kind of discovered what is behind it. But you are likely going to have a team. And one of the challenges is these may be doctors at different facilities, they're in different specialties, getting them to coordinate, or getting someone to be, if you will, the quarterback, sometimes. And egos can play a real role in that not working out well. Yeah. It can be a challenge, but you got to be an advocate for yourself in order to say, hey, I'm a whole person who has a few different things going on here. And I really, and Cheryl, there we go. Yeah. There's a lot of people who are well-meaning, but they all have pressures, and all the physicians out there, they've got all sorts of pressures on them. And you have to stick up for yourself to say, hey, this is the main issue with me, and Dr. X and Nurse Y, I really need your help here because, I feel as if, this is the thing that's impacting my life. And there are therapies and there's ways of dealing with it, but you need to have the right people in your corner and the right team assembled.
And you have to have the right mindset. And that's why, like, you both use the word advocate, because at the end of the day, your doctors are there to help you. And it's easy. The more attention you feel you're needing, it's easy to go, I don't want to bother a doctor. I've already called and asked 3 times, and that's a great way to get really sick. Really,
you gotta be squeaky wheel. It may not be part of your culture, your personality, anything like that. But if you are not And again, these folks are all well-meaning, but if you do not stick up for yourself and call attention and say, "Hey, I'm not doing as well as I could," those of us with PI, those of us with a lot of rare conditions, there are good therapies out there for us. And with primary immune deficiency, the immunoglobulin that I'm on, the antibody replacements, which I now get every week, I lead an almost completely normal life when you get down to it. But but it's really easy to become, roadkill, on the highway of healthcare here. And if I'm not sticking up for myself to make sure that I'm getting the right therapy, getting it at the right levels, there was a time when, I used to get it every 4 weeks instead of what was every 3 weeks. And in that fourth week, I'd be getting sick. And to raise your hand and say, "Hey, doc, can we do something? Can we shorten that interval? Can we see if, maybe that makes a difference?" For quality of life, that made such a difference. And it's not natural for most people, but it makes life, well, very, very different and very much easier in a lot of cases.
Well, I got two quick questions, and I know we're on a limited time schedule, but did COVID scare you with this coming down with primary immune? I've got, like I said, we've got several friends in common. Did it shake your world a little bit? Have you changed any habits? Is mask wearing good for, you know what I'm saying? Let's talk about COVID a little bit, and then I want to talk about the therapy and how people can help.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, to the COVID question, yes and no. Those of us who have immune deficiencies, we're potentially more, susceptible and are going to have a harder time, with some reasonably common pathogens that are out there, common bacteria, viruses, bugs that are out there. And so by and large, we learn to become more careful than maybe the average person. So, when COVID hit, we were probably the best prepared people out there for this. We're comfortable and really thoughtful about hand washing, about not being around someone who's sneezing and coughing. I hear that from someone, and whoo, I'm at the other side of the room. I'm leaving, just because even with the protections that I'm given, I can get sick or more sick than maybe the average person. And so there was a lot of fear in our community because we didn't know what it would mean. Are we going to fare worse than the average person? There's still not a ton of data out there, but by and large, it's showing that those of us in our community who have gotten COVID, it's not been the worst case scenario that we were afraid it was going to be. But then again, members of our community have been extra careful, I would argue, about not getting it just because of our natural inclination towards assessing risk. Is it really worth going to the grocery store or to this restaurant or to this bar where there's all these people once it became known that, it was, aerosolized and all that. So it's still kind of scary because we are at some level all maybe more vulnerable than the average person.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, there are a lot of folks who, as we say, have been kind of limping through life. They probably have an undiagnosed immune deficiency or some other disorder that is, again, they're a zebra. There's something going on there. I know what I've got, and so I can, at a lot of levels, guard against it. But for people who are maybe vulnerable and they've never been diagnosed, that's really scary. That some of those folks who have gotten COVID and done poorly, the medical community is expecting their immune system to kind of kick in and do what it's supposed to do. And if their levels are a little bit low or a lot low in terms of their immune function, then that's going to make that hill a lot harder to climb.
Well,
so
time. I mean, there's time going by from if you do get sick, and they don't know that you have the primary immune deficiency or an issue with your immune system. The most valuable thing you have, I would think, as a doctor, one of them is time, because as soon as we can figure it out, we can start treating it appropriately. And if they're not looking for it, and they're thinking your immune system should be kicking in and we're going to treat you with that assumption, and it doesn't happen, that's when you can get in really behind the 8 ball, I would think. But let's switch it, because I know we only have about 10 more minutes. There's treatments that you take, and I know other people take, immunoglobulin. And real quick, and you may not know this is the silly question, because I've had this conversation. When someone that has like a PI like you do, and there's supplements out there like a vitamin D that helps boost your immune system. Well, if you don't have an immune system to boost, is it really helping your immune system? I'm not saying it's not good for you. I'm asking you one of those rhetorical questions. Has that ever crossed your mind?
Oh, 100%. And let me tell you, I would love to go to war with some of the folks who really do have these claims that are unfounded. There are a lot of things out there in the world of, theoretically supplements or, let's say complementary medicine, which maybe there's some evidence that some of these things are good and are helpful, and that certainly if you have a deficiency of it, that's not a good thing. The problem is that the immune system, you can't boost it. Like with the only way of boosting, for example, my immune system or anyone else's who is lacking in a piece, is to replace the specific thing that is missing. And so there's some there's a lot of snake oil out there, frankly, and there's nothing that replaces the thing that is truly missing. But if this is just general health, in terms of having a balanced nutrition and making sure that I don't necessarily get out as much as I do, and so maybe a little extra vitamin D would be good.
That helps, right? Vitamin D is good for you too.
Yeah, it's all these things are good for anyone theoretically, but you gotta, and this is just one of those things, you gotta talk about it with your doc, and your care team, even if you are not dealing with these things, to say, hey, which of these things are useful, which of them are not. But in our world, if you've got an immune system, you can, drink all the wheatgrass you want, and you can go for all the walks and, all these things. But our problem is, call it, bad car analogy. When I take my immunoglobulin, it only lasts for a certain amount of time. Those antibodies are only circulating in your bloodstream for about 21, 28 days, at which point, the half-life kind of drops off. Once the gas is out of the tank, once you've run out of gas, that car, it's not going anywhere. You got to refill it and refill it. There is no other alternative for those who, for example, have a certain type of antibody deficiency, which is why we need a therapy to give us what it is that we don't have. There's just no turning on the thing that we are missing without, frankly, gene therapy or what's known as a bone marrow transplant, or something that is, frankly, can be high risk, but of course high reward.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask you about immunoglobulin, but I want to say this. I've got a good friend of mine who is not the snake oil guy. He is a holistic health guy. And one of the things that we have noticed, because I've done a lot of podcasts with him, is a lot of the people that get sick, just regular people, have a vitamin D deficiency. And it's because it has nothing to do with anything. I just wanted to bring it up because I think as Americans, we take our health for granted, and we're not getting the vitamins that we need and the sunshine we need. And to be honest with you, when COVID hit, it put a focus, I think, for a lot of people just to be healthier in general. And if you have an immune deficiency issue, I think the healthier you can make your body to fight it, the better you're giving your body a chance when you do get your immune globulin. You know what I'm saying? So now your immune system's good, and it's going into a healthier body.
I mean, we all should be and there's no secrets about it. With our society, not just in the U.S. but globally. I mean, in terms of what we're eating, in terms of lack of exercise, in terms of all these things, there's some things that are missing, and we should all be striving to lead as healthy a lifestyle as as makes sense for us. But one of the the pieces is, again, for the average person, for the horses, that's all very good.
Yes.
But for the zebras, again, all of that in the world is not going to, it might optimize you a little bit for when you do have, the other therapies a little bit, but so much of it just depends on this other, piece that does make us different. And, there are things, again, beyond the immunoglobulins that do make us different in terms of how we respond to vaccines, why we rely on the rest of, the nation or our community around us to achieve herd immunity in general.
You saying you don't respond to vaccines the same?
No, because vaccines, by and large, are stimulating antibodies. And so I and a lot of other people, basically, we're getting, if you're getting the immunoglobulin therapy, I'm getting other people's antibodies against tetanus, against pneumonia, against all these things that, you probably go and get a booster of every now and again. for the flu that's going around, but it doesn't work for us the way that it works for other people. You give me a flu shot, it's going to give me a little bit of, and this gets in the weeds here, a little bit of kind of T cell kind of benefit, but it's not doing what it is supposed to be doing because I'm not creating my own antibodies because I don't have my own antibodies to create. I rely on other people.
So your body, I want to make sure I understand this. And just so your body, you get a flu shot, your body starts building antibodies against that flu shot, right? It goes, okay.
Theoretically, that's the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah, that's how the body works. PI, folks, with what you have, you get the flu shot, your body has nothing to go develop against it. That's why you have to get your immunoglobulin, the antibodies that come in. And this, you talked about that earlier, the half-life on that's 21 days. So they can give you all the vaccines in the world. It's not, your body's never going to cluster around it and gather and go, let's go, boys.
I mean, that's the thing. And people make, there's a lot of it. We have, with some children's books and things like that, explaining in terms of, the soldiers that are fighting the enemy. No, we can't, we don't have that. When those orders are given by the vaccine, it doesn't work for us. And so we do rely on, for the flu, for the other things that are out there, the polio vaccine, things like that, things that we hope will, remain a, part of the history books here. We rely on our communities around us getting their vaccines to make sure that they are safe and that they are not, spreading these things, out there, which is why we're really hopeful that everyone is going to go and to get, as soon as, they're able to, one of the COVID vaccines, because, I'm planning to take the vaccine as soon as I get it, but it's going to give me a little bit of benefit with the T cells, but it's not going to give me that classic B cell antibody response, which is frankly the important part. So, I could preach about this for a long time, but safe to say, we are, there's a lot of things that we can do and we do to make ourselves safe, that our physicians do to do the same. But, we operate within a society and we are looking forward very much to getting back to normal once that vaccine is really prevalent. But, we are reliant upon, the rest of our community having what is again known as herd immunity, having that sort of majority immunity so that it's not spreading and it's not going like wildfire all around.
Well, and two, first of all, I'm glad you're getting the vaccine. I'm surprised if it doesn't work, you're getting it, but I understand it's probably for a little bit of an example. And you said it helps a little bit.
It has some benefit, again, it depends on your diagnosis though.
Yeah. Second, and I know we brought this up and I think it might be a great place to wrap this episode up. And I would love, I got a list of questions I didn't get to, dadgummit, but that's okay. I'm a talker. So, when you keep saying we're dependent as a society on herd immunity anyway, right? That's what we are dependent. And if you hear something in the background, my dog's in the house because it's raining here, so he may get restless. So we as a society are dependent on herd immunity anyway, right? Just regular people, we're dependent on the herd immunity, everybody getting the vaccine. But you need people to get the vaccine and they also build up their herd immunity, but they also got to find a way to give you this plasma. That's called the transition. And for you to tell me how people can give plasma. Is there a place out there, John?
Clint, it's like you serve this one up and I just got to knock it out. Yeah, I mean, perfect segue here. So the immunoglobulin that I receive, that tens of thousands of us who have PI receive, and people use it for other things other than antibody replacement. They use it for some neurological disorders, and there's other plasma derived medicines, stuff where you can't make it in a factory. Doesn't come in pill form, anything like this. You only get that antibody diversity from human beings. For example, many people have heard of hemophilia, where your blood does not clot properly. There are things within plasma that are then made into medicines, to make it so that those folks, do not have these sort of bleeding, issues that they would have otherwise. So basically, there's all these different conditions where if you donate plasma, and not whole blood, everyone's used to the Red Cross and all the other, local things, which is great. And don't get me wrong, we all hopefully will not need it, but there's so many instances where, whole blood is needed, and it treats so many different things in hospitals and outside of it. But that's the whole blood is the red cells, it's the it's the plasma, and it's the platelets all together. Plasma is that kind of liquidy part when you take the red cells out, take the platelets out, and it's got all these other proteins. And you can donate it in, for example, a hospital. People saw Tom Hanks and I think his wife donating plasma because they'd recovered from COVID, and they were going to turn that into specific anti-COVID therapy. Well, before all that happened, and in parallel to all that happening, there's about 800 plus plasma donation centers around the country, and that is where people go and they donate there once or twice a week. It can be done more frequently than blood donations, and they donate and they're compensated for their time, and that plasma, it goes through a very rigorous process by which it's then turned into these therapies, such as the ones that I rely on, frankly, to live. But the only way that I can get these therapies, and that anyone else with an immune deficiency, who relies on the human factor based, products that are out there, is by donating plasma at these plasma centers. And to your question, if you go to plasmahero.org, you can find a map there that's got a list of all the plasma centers all around the country, because even before COVID hit, people who donated plasma were heroes to those of us who are on the receiving end of it. And we want more people to be heroes. And frankly, you wouldn't necessarily know what these plasma centers are if you were to drive by them. In a lot of cases, they're in the equivalent of a strip mall, or they're kind of a little standalone facility, and they look kind of medical. But if you don't know that by going to that place and donating, you are saving lives. I would not be alive today without this, and a lot of people out there would not the same. Then you wouldn't know the importance of it. So with COVID, with people talking about antibodies, talking about convalescent plasma, we want to just push people to think about, and if they can't donate, themselves, if there is a plasma center in their community that they can maybe inspire their neighbors to go to, their friends, their family, tens and tens of thousands of us rely on these products for our lives. So if they donate plasma, then we will be able to weather the storms that we see as coming up, because frankly, because of COVID, there's been a decrease in those who have been donating.
Well, that's how I was going to kind of, as we wrap this up, there is going to be everything kind of comes coming, is that we are going to have a shortage of the plasma with the COVID antibodies that you need. So it is important, if you've had COVID, if you get the vaccine, everything looks good on your end and you want to give. The other part of this, because we had conversations again before we came on, maybe the next time, I think people would be shocked how expensive the therapy is. And if you don't have the right insurance and can't do it, how you are really just pretty much out of luck. I want to thank Cheryl for setting this up, and she gave some good comments over here. She actually asked 2 of my questions before I could get to them on my doctor prescription paper here. I want to wrap it up and say what I've got to say very quick. I'm going to give you the final word. First of all, I think one of the main things that came out of this for me is and this is where what I'm about to say is not affiliated with this gentleman or his organization. I'm a conservative for the most part. I don't vote party lines, but I will say this. The mask thing, I completely get, but I will say this. You don't know what the person next to you has or is going through. It is the job of sick people to take care of themselves as much as possible. And I completely accept the right to not wear the mask. If you do it, I'm American as you can get. I also want people to approach that subject and topic with a little bit of compassion and understanding that not everybody that looks healthy is always healthy. And it doesn't take much for them to become sick quickly. I think I said that right. So there's one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on and talk is I think there is this concept of we forget what pre-existing conditions are in the United States. Almost everybody has somebody around them that has a pre-existing condition. And I just think we throw that out there now. We forget, well, that's your grandmother, that's your mom, that's your sister, that's your friend, So I would love for us to approach these topics with a little more compassion. Now, with that being said, please tell everybody where they can find more information about your organization, and whatever you want to give as advice to the human beings that watch this.
Sure. To learn more about, if you think that you might have, or someone around you might that is always sick, maybe they should learn a little bit more, talk with their doctor about, an immune deficiency. Primaryimmune.org. Again, we're a patient advocacy organization. We can kind of talk, and maybe queue people up to talk with their physicians. But I think the real core is there's a lot of people out there who are diagnosed with primary immune deficiencies. There's a lot of people out there who they're undiagnosed. And so learning a little bit about it, just keeping in the back of your head, talking with your doctor about it, and being an advocate, especially if you've been dealing with this for a long time, really is critical, because we find so many people who their lives change when they ask those right questions, get that right blood test, and find out, oh, the reason that I've been having all these issues is I got something that's a little bit, not as expected. I'm a zebra. And so, a little bit to your point there, there's a lot of us out here, and and these issues are genetic. The pathogens that we're dealing with, it transcends politics. These issues are real, and the people out there, while you may be weighing some different issues that are important to you, we are ultimately, again, together in a society, and you're great. Your priorities may be this, but your grandmother or people around you who may have an invisible illness have some different ones. And so some thoughtfulness and balance and just recognition that family member could end up, in a vulnerable position, and just balancing that and bringing that into the equation. And if you are healthy and all is well, and you took a little something from Clint's pokes here and the podcast, phenomenal, and something to think about. But again, if you are healthy and maybe eligible, you think that you're able to donate blood, please consider going to plasmahero.org, www.plasmahero.org, to see if there's a plasma center near you, because you'll be, frankly, saving the lives of me and thousands upon thousands of people that I care about. And I really appreciate the opportunity to push that out to folks.
No, man, I'm glad you came on. I know you're busy. Again, I would love to have other conversations more specific on topic to keep it very, very focused. I just want us to have conversations about stuff sometimes with more compassion. I'm not saying you got to change your mind. Just talk with people like they're people and you care. Plasmahero.org, primaryimmune.org, if I'm not mistaken, that's your website. Go find out, use them as a resource. And John, I hope we can do this again in the near future. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Clint. Really, this was a pleasure.
Bye. Thank you.
Take care now.